on the Experience Pros Facebook page, and we'll interact with you live on the show.
Welcome back to the Experience Pros Radio Show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for ours. The roadmap guiding leaders through the tangled interchanges of the business world is undergoing a complete recalibration as it adapts to the era of hyper change. And here to speak about that is Jeff Pearsall, one of the co-authors of the book, Dogs Don't Bark at Parked Cars, Your GPS in an Era of Hyper Change. Jeff, welcome to the Experience Pros Radio Show.
Eric, thanks for having me. It's a great joy to be with you, man.
It's very nice to have you. I should mention that you're the founder and CEO of SCB Marketing, and your co-author, Eric Wright, is the president of publishing at SCB Marketing. And you've written this book, Dogs Don't Bark at Parked Cars. Why? What do you see going on in the marketplace?
That's a great question. You know, if you pay any attention right now, we are on an accelerated path of change. And the economy, the world we live in society-wise, socially, is going to be totally different in 10 to 15 years. But there's some basic elements that are not going to change in order to build a successful business. And we took a painstaking time of over 18 years of identifying that in extensive interviews with thousands of what I call the heartbeat of our economy, which is our second stage CEOs. They're the ones that are running companies from 2 million to 50 million in revenue. And they're the ones that make up primarily the largest part of the job growth in the country also.
Would you define that as small business?
You know, it's very interesting. You know, your government will define it not as small business, and your economy will, you know, look at everybody else that's above 50 million,
sure.
And they really are the lost area.
Yeah.
And but I got to tell you, the foundations of what they do, Eric, are very, very consistent, and those are the 10 principles that we identify in the book, and it really lays out what I call a roadmap to freedom. Which is, you know, what most all people are really driving for anyway.
Sure. You know, I'm fascinated by the concept in large part because I do see exponential rate of growth and change and development happening in the workplace. And yet we've stayed by our tagline of it doesn't matter what business you're in the relationship business. It's as true today as it was 12 years ago when we created it. Your research took 18 years. Give us an example of one or two of these things that have stayed consistent over those 18 years, and you anticipate that to move forward.
Yeah, what we find with the CEOs in this particular niche, and it's not that they're not in the larger niche or the smaller, this is just where our sweet spot was, is that they're very consistent in looking at their future from a faith-based. And what I mean by that is not from a religious standpoint. You know, faith and fear have exactly the same definitions, and it's the things unseen in our future. But if you approach them from a fear-based standpoint, you're going to attract that fear. And it's not that you're not scared of the next day of making cash or getting payroll covered or what the next thing is that's coming up. It's that you've got the faith to get through it. And it's a very consistent standard and element in all the different CEOs that we've been around. The other thing is how important, and you just spoke to it, is trust and relationships inside of your company. Because without it, as much as technology grows, we still keep coming back to the human beings that are involved in the company and the human beings that interact with the others, like your vendors, your customers,
sure,
and on down that line. So those are very consistent components that, and we identify the other 6 or 7 in the book as we go through.
Our guest is Jeff Pearsall. He's one of the authors of the new book, Dogs Don't Bark at Parked Cars, and your GPS in an Era of Hyper Change. Taking a look at the cover of this book here, Jeff, I just got to ask, is that clip art or is that your dog, man?
No, man, that was my English bulldog that was given to our kids by my father when we moved to St. Louis, and that's Rudy.
What a classic picture. Buy the book just for the picture, folks. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It
now
catches your attention, which is what we intended.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking about, settling the voices, or at least not listening to the voices that find fault. And yet, correct. There's still, jokers to the left of me, fools to the right. They're everywhere. Is there something that you can give our listeners in the next minute and a half of a step in the direction of saying, you know something, I'm going to make a game-changing decision today?
Yeah, the first thing, Eric, and it's a great question, is that, you really do need to know the end before you begin. And what we do find as a mistake is that so many people get started in business and they really didn't know what the end game was going to be. Yeah. And so they get into business and then they're trying to get out, or they're trying to figure out how to leverage themselves. And the business has owned them, and they really haven't achieved the freedom that they were looking to go achieve. And what we've discovered is that all human beings are wired for freedom. And it's either a drive for freedom of time, a freedom of relationships, or a freedom of money, or a freedom of purpose. And what we think the best way to get there is a model of ethical capitalism, which allows you to go achieve that. And that's what these principles in the book set forth, is really a pathway to go achieve that freedom through ethical capitalism.
Boy, nothing gets by me. That phrase, ethical capitalism, expound on that for just a minute, if you don't mind, Jeff.
Oh, absolutely. So, it's really lost in our system of education today. Ethical is really simple. It's just do the right thing. And capitalism is the drive of the difference between the public or the private sector owning the profit. So if you just look in any given situation where our public entities are owning the profit centers, it's a mess. Yeah. And the private sector has to drive that. And so, as long as you've got that freedom to drive that economy through the private sector and you're doing the right thing, and what the media does is focus on the ones that do it the wrong way. And so therefore, we've lost the true definition of capitalism, and we think of it as a 4-letter cuss word instead of what it really is a great pathway to true freedom.
Really, really well said. Jeff, I hope to have you back on the program another time. You are articulate about your and knowledgeable about your subject matter, but more to the point, you got your fingers on the pulse of what is absolutely happening on the heartbeat or the backbone of the American economy. The book is called Dogs Don't Bark at Parked Cars, Your GPS in an Era of Hyper Change. Quickly, Jeff, tell us, where do we get a copy and how do we stay connected to you?
So you can get a copy at Amazon, or you can also stay connected to me at jeffpearsall.com. And Eric, I just want to thank you for doing what you're doing to be able to highlight, efforts that people like ourselves are doing in the country. So keep up the great work.
We got to work together on this whole thing. Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. It's all good. Folks, don't go anywhere. We got more positive business talk right after these messages. You're listening to the Experience Pros Radio Show.